Hi, I'm Greta,
Hi, I'm Millie,
and you're listening to the Books We Meet in the Library.
a bookish podcast about reading and the book community.
Millie, what are you currently reading?
So, I'm currently in the middle of two different books.
Mhm.
One of them is The Wedding People by Alison
Okay.
Esposh, and the other one is Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. I started Foundry Side in December, only got through half of it, put it down for a couple of weeks, and now I'm trying it back again. And
Okay.
I am like halfway through both of these books, and they're like completely different vibes, but I'm here for it.
I can only imagine when I saw that you were reading when I saw you were like 60% through the Wedding People, I was like, oh my god, I need to catch up. Like, like a full blown panic attack. I was like, oh my god, I'm lollygagging with what I'm currently reading, which is Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood.
I am not surprised you're starting off your year with an Ali Hazelwood book.
I Okay, so this is YA. It's Ali Hazelwood's first YA.
Oh,
Yes, and it is a romance. And so starting off my year with a YA romance is kind of crazy, but it's Ali Hazelwood, so I'm really enjoying it. It's a good
okay.
time
I
so
was gonna
far.
say, I
Yeah.
was like, it's either gonna be really good or absolutely flop.
No,
It gives
I'm
me the
really
same
enjoying it.
hesitations as Bride. Like when I heard she was doing
Oh,
it, I was like,
no, Bride is a whole different thing. You don't, yeah, Bride is an entirely different thing. This one is really, I'm liking it so far. So it's good. It's good stuff. Bride, I knew I wasn't liking like 25% of the way in. So this is good.
nice.
It's good. Yeah.
All right. We are going to go through today's episode. It's our first one for 2025 for
I'm
our
so
season
excited.
3 of our podcast. This is
It's
great.
crazy.
We're back to recording our beautiful faces instead of just our voices. So you guys get to see our faces when we get to hear each other's thoughts and commentary about this book, which is going to be fantastic.
Terrifying.
Okay, so for the first episode, we are reviewing The Ministry of Time by Kayleigh Bradley, which is a sci-fi romance, and it actually won in the sci-fi category for the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2024.
Hmm.
So you had brought this to my attention, and I had like vaguely heard of the book. And when I read the synopsis, I was like, okay, I'm sold. I want to read this book. It's caught my interest. And the
Hmm.
fact that it was the winner, I'm like, okay, this is a good sign. Let's just start off with a bang. Um, so we're going to do a spoiler cover to cover review of the book. So if you haven't read the book,
Get
stop the
out.
recording, go get it, read it, come back, because we're going to spoil the entire thing. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
I'm so nervous about this one. I am so nervous. Oh my god. I posted some while I was reading. While I'm reading, I always post my progress on Goodreads. Just because it also helps me remember like parts of the book. Even if I post the most vague comment about it, it'll like help me remember this is how you were feeling around this point. And I'm always like, am I giving too much away? Is Millie gonna like instantly know? It's so scary. Ugh.
Okay, so I had started going on Insta stories on
Okay.
Instagram, and I was like, okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna start like
Oh yeah, you're
recording. Like
active again. You're active again on
I'm
Instagram.
active, like my dead Instagram has come back to life, and I
Yes.
was like, okay, I want to start like posting daily things like that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then I realized I was like, oh shoot, I just can't do any like spoilers about the books that we're reading for the podcast, like before we record.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I had thoughts about the Ministry of Time. So I'm just vlogging for like my personal vlog. And I'm just spewing all of my thoughts in there, but I'm like purposely not posting anything on Instagram so that you don't see it. And then the second book that I pick up is The Wedding People. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't spoil anything there either. So I'm just like, just
Yeah.
keeping my thoughts to myself.
It's rough. It's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And the urge I get to like want to text you and be like, oh my god, what is going, it's just I have to just like keep it bottled in, keep it bottled in.
I
Ugh.
always try to predict what you're going to feel like with the book. Because I feel
It's
like
terrifying.
we're either like exactly the same
Yeah.
or we're just like completely different. It's one or
Yeah.
the other. And for this one, I was just like, I literally have no idea. I have no idea what you think of this book. I have no idea where to base this off of. Nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely
Okay.
nothing. And I feel like you also have no idea what I think of this book either.
I have zero clue what you think. This is like, honestly, this is the scariest book club known to man.
It is. Okay, okay. So we're going to start off by revealing our rating to each other and to you guys. And as you guys can realize, we don't know what each other is thinking of with this book. So we're going to use the call pile rating system that was created by G from Book Roast. So essentially, there are 7 different categories. We have character, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. We rate them from 1 through 10, average out the rating, and that is our star rating. And it's usually pretty like it averages up pretty well, like on
Yeah,
par
I
with
think
what
it
we think.
does. Hmm.
Okay, so are you ready?
Yeah, I'm horrified.
Me too. Okay, I have my notes here. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. All right. For character, what did you say, Greta?
I gave the characters an 8.
I gave the characters a 3.
She hated the book, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
For atmosphere, what did you give it, Greta?
I gave the atmosphere an 8.
I gave it a 4.
Okay.
For writing, what did you give it, Greta?
I gave it a 7.
I gave it a 3.
Oh my gosh. Really? Even the writing?
I hated the writing.
Okay, okay. Let's get to it. I need to know.
For plot, what did you give it?
I gave it a 6.
I gave it a 3.
Okay.
For intrigue, what did you give it?
For intrigue, I gave it a 7.
I gave it a 3.
A 3, yeah. I had that. I felt that one coming. Oh my god.
For logic, what did you give it?
I gave it a 6.
Shocker, I gave it a 3.
Yeah.
For enjoyment,
I gave it a 7.
I gave it a 3.
Okay. What is your total?
My total is a 3.42, which is
Okay.
um a
2
2-star.
star?
But when
Uh-huh.
I was like thinking of my review before doing the
Mhm.
call pal rating
Mhm.
system, I was like,
Mhm.
this is a 1.5. So
Okay.
it's a
Okay. Yeah.
1.5. My first book of the year is a
Is a
1.5.
1.5. Yeah. Okay. So my total is what was my total? Oh god. I'm pulling up my calculator right now. My total was a 49. So it's 7. It's a 4-star, but I am most definitely giving this a 3-star. Um like going through and breaking down each section, I was, going in and putting in my numbers, and I was like, I feel like I'm grading it a little bit too high. But breaking down section by section, I didn't hate it. But overall, boy, was I wildly disappointed in this one. I think the last update I posted, which I thought was going to give it away for you, was, oh my gosh, I'm never trusting a TikTok or Goodreads award suggestion ever again.
Um,
Yeah.
I hated this book so much.
No,
There
I
was
feel
just like
you.
angry hate ranting for my vlog as I
Oh,
was
I can't
reviewing
wait to
this,
see
and I
that.
was just like, oh my god. And it's so funny because my friend Rachel, she and
Mhm.
I, like, we have 90% of our books that are completely different, like our reading
Mhm.
taste.
Mhm.
So there's very few
She'd
books that
love
we
it.
align in. Yeah, she loved it. She's like, it's one of my
Oh my
favorites. I was
god.
like, and she told me this when I was like 25% through the book, and I was just like, I think that means I'm gonna hate this book.
No, because can we talk? Okay, let's get to it because I want to talk about the 30% mark because
Hmm.
oh my gosh, this was the slowest pace book at the beginning. The first half, the okay, wait, no, let's get to it
Let's get to it. Let's get to it.
so we can
Okay.
spoil.
All right. So before we start, we're going to go into the content warnings. There are a lot of content warnings for this book. So just be warned that if any of these topics make you uncomfortable, then just be cautious as you're listening to our podcast. For content warnings, we have violence, attempted murder, kidnapping, imprisonment, racism, homophobia, PTSD, depression, anxiety, colonialism, and inherited trauma, climate change, and triggering historical events.
That's a lot of content warnings.
There's a lot of things that happened in this book, and that was part of this problem. Okay, moving on to the current Goodreads rating. It sits at a 3.62, which, in
Mhm.
all honesty, was a red flag with it being the number one choice for the sci fi category, with it rating so average.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of people
Honestly,
either love this book or hate it. It's
hmm
so polarizing.
the comments are so polarizing. I think that this book is a perfect example of how the sample size that Goodreads draws from for the Goodreads awards and everything, the sample size is so skewed that it brings to the top these like winners, which are really not good representatives of their category.
So, you know who did blurb this?
Who?
Our Queen Emily Henry.
Yeah, that should have been a sign. That should have been. I'm so
Mm.
sorry for everything that I love Emily Henry for. Maybe, maybe a real good romance author should not be blurbing for what is supposed to be sci-fi.
But babe, this is sci-fi romance.
It's not good sci-fi romance.
Good sci-fi
Okay,
romance.
because okay, I'm gonna compare this to the only other sci-fi book I've read last year, and that was Annie Bot. Um, And holy crap, that was definitely not romance. It was quite the opposite of romance. But it was such good sci fi. And the moments that were quote unquote romantic were so romantic that you felt so conflicted about the relationship the entire time. This was just not good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
All
like
right.
I'm realizing now that I gave my rating way too high. And if you catch me on Goodreads giving it like a 2 or a 3, mind your business. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into the synopsis so that all of you guys who
Yes,
haven't read the book
please.
and are just here for us ranting about this book know what we're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah. All right. Good reading synops, but live. Horrifying.
Woo!
I this first of all, this synopsis is gigantic. So I'm reading it off my phone. I We have our notes to the side. Mind your business. Okay. The Ministry of Time. A time traveler romance, a spy thriller, a workplace comedy, and an indigenous exploration of the nature of power and the potential of love to change it all. In the near future, a civil servant is offered the salary of her dreams and is shortly afterwards told what project she'll be working on. A recently established government ministry is gathering quote unquote expats from across history to establish whether time travel is feasible for the body and also for the fabric of space and time. She is tasked with working as a bridge, living with, assisting, and monitoring the expats known as 1847 or Commander Graham Gore. As far as history is concerned, Commander Grant Gore died in Sir John Franklin's doomed 1845 expedition to the Arctic. So he's a little disoriented to be living with an unmarried woman who regularly shows her calves, surrounded by outlandish concepts such as quote unquote washing machines, Spotify, and the collapse of the British Empire. But with an appetite for discovery, a 7 a day cigarette habit, and the support of a charming and chaotic cast of fellow expats, he soon adjusts. Over the next year, what the bridge initially thought would be the best, a horrifically unromantic no, a horrifically uncomfortable roommate dynamic evolves into something much deeper. It's also very unromantic. That was a slip on my end, but that also is incredibly true. Um, by the time the true shape of the ministry's projects comes to light, the bridge has fallen haphazardly, fervently in love with consequences she never could have imagined. Forced to confront the choices that brought them together, the bridge must finally reckon with how and whether she believes what she does next can change the future. Okay, so in theory, wow. Oh my gosh. You're telling me there's time travel? You're telling me that this person is tasked with taking care of someone from what year is it? Mm,
1847.
18, 1845, 1845, from the doomed ship in 1845. Like, that sounds so interesting. There's going to be a little bit of like dynamic between getting that person adjusted to like modern day feminism and, not being racist and stuff like that, and the fall of the British Empire. Like, in theory, very good, but it's also trying to tackle so much while also having them fall in love and also having like additional characters. And yeah, it's a lot.
I get the most upset with books that had so much potential.
Yes.
So much potential, and that they
Yes.
like fumbled the execution. That's what pisses me off the most. So, like, this
Mm-hmm.
book had a really, really brilliant idea because, often when it comes to time travel and like time travel novels, it's the
Mm-hmm.
main character traveling through time, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're experiencing the different time period. But
Mm-hmm.
in this case, we have a main character that's helping other people adjust to her timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really interesting. I love the fact that it was like pairing people up to help them like acclimate and things like that. I could see how it could be like a historical sci-fi romance for those elements. And then when it said it was like also a spy thriller, I'm like, okay, there's going to be like some kind of government conspiracy here. It's
Action.
going to
It's
turn
gonna be
into a little bit of
action.
action. Yeah. And so I got really excited. I got really excited by the premise because I was like, okay, this sounds like it's going to be really, really good. And unfortunately, and I think you can agree with me on this, the biggest problem with this book is that the writer took everything in the kitchen sink, threw it on the wall, and said, let's have it all. And
Yeah.
their editor didn't help them trim it down. And so there was
Yeah.
just so much going on in this book, so many elements, and that made it so that none of those particular elements were executed well.
Yeah.
And it
I
was just
wholeheartedly agree.
frustrating going through this book, being just like, this is so bad. Why? It could have been so good.
Also, I realized that the synopsis talks about a little bit about like comedy, workplace comedy. This did not need to be a workplace comedy. This could have been as dark as it needed to be. And I think it would have been better if we leaned in to that. Also, the lack of action in this is my biggest pet peeve with this book.
All the action happened in the last like
Te-
30% of the book.
Girl, 10%. I kept
Oh,
on looking at like how much time I had left, and I was like, when are we gonna get to, like, this is really boring. Like, this is really boring. By the 30% mark, I was like, is nothing going to happen? Where is the big, like, where's the big plot twist? Because right now everyone's just like dilly dally, like that, it, I,
mhm.
I it felt so short for me. And that's so funny because like talking about it now, I'm like, no, this is definitely like a 3 or 2 star. My 4 star rating is definitely just so wrong.
Okay, my goal is to convince you to go down to 1 star. Just FYI, that is the goal of this podcast: is to
Okay.
convince Greta by
Okay.
the end of this
Okay.
1 hour
Okay.
recording to go down to
Okay.
1 star, because I'm gonna list all the reasons this book fumbled. Okay.
Honestly, it might not be that hard because I'm already like swayed. I'm already swaying. So
Okay, you know what? I take my book influencing job very
very
seriously.
seriously. I mean, but for starters, let's talk about the cover because the cover is phenomenal. I love the cover. That's honestly what kind of like got me interested in it. It's also so colorful and yeah, I
I
fell
like it
short
too.
unfortunately. Hmm?
Okay, so we're gonna go into the breakdown of the plot of this story. And then as we're doing it, we'll just give our commentary on it. So I'm going to start it off with the first part. Okay, so jumping into it. So we're starting off in 1847 because our love interest, Commander Graham Gore, was part of a naval expedition that had been stuck in the Arctic, far from civilization, for 2 years. So while hunting for food, Graham sees a flash of light and a blue doorway. It's the last thing he remembers. Later, the rest of his crew abandons their ship and attempts to march 800 miles to civilization. They all perish along the way. In the present timeline, the novel's unnamed narrator acquires a top secret job in a British government department called the Ministry. She learns the Ministry has access to time travel and has extracted five expats from history in an experiment to observe the effects of time travel on them, both physically and psychologically. The narrator will spend a year as a quote unquote bridge, who's constantly monitoring the expat from 1847, Graham Gore, and helping him adjust to modern society. Even intense culture shock can't subdue Graham's charm, humor, and self control. Before long, the narrator begins to fall hopelessly in love with him. The two develop friendships with the expats from 1916 and 1655, Arthur and Maggie, as well as Arthur's bridge, Similia. All five of the expats in the ministry's experiment undergo constant testing to assess their health, cognitive integrity, and social adjustment. So this is essentially the first like 20% of the book, which is really just giving the foundation for the premise, the experiment, all that stuff, introducing all of the characters. So what did you think of the narrator and what did you think of the love interest, Commander Gore?
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is Graham Gore, our love interest, because there's one thing I know a thing or two about. It's love interests in romance novels. Even though this isn't supposed to be a romance novel, technically it's being sold to me as one. Um, when you were going through our description of Graham Gore and how he is charming and so funny, and girl, none of that happens in the book. This man is neither charming nor funny. There are instances where he's very caring, and I appreciated those instances. But besides for that, he falls so flat. Like truly falls so flat as a love interest.
Okay, wait, sorry, I gotta interrupt you. He's the only part of this book that I liked.
What?
He's the only part of this book that I liked. I loved him as a character, and I was like rooting for him the entire time. And the entire time, I was like, "You can do better."
What? He's
Yeah,
the only character that you liked?
yeah,
Oh, I am absolutely losing my mind. Girl, are you serious? He was so
yeah.
obnoxious.
I found him funny.
I found him so annoying. I found him trying to like fit in and learn
Hmm.
about the present time. That part was funny. And it was like obviously, him having to learn about what racism is and misogyny. Like all of this was funny. Not funny as in haha, but funny as in wow, I never thought about what it would be like for someone to come back from the past and like learn about these things. But how he is being sold to us as a romance character, please, please. I felt no romantic chemistry between Graham and then our narrator, which was your second question. How do I feel about the narrator?
Hmm. Okay, I was doing my first vlog update with like the
Okay.
first like 25% of the book, and I was
Okay.
just like, "Oh shoot, I forgot the name of the main character." And then like I went back to go look for it and I'm like, "I can't find it anywhere." And I go to look in
Mm-hmm.
the comments, I can't find it anywhere. It took me that entire time to realize that at no point did they name the main character and that that was intentional.
Yeah, it's a self insert.
I didn't realize that. Like
It's
that's how
awful.
like out of tuned I was with the book. I also hated the narrator. I hated the narrator with a fiery passion. I couldn't stand her. Like in the beginning she wasn't that bad, but
Okay.
as she goes throughout the book,
Mm-hmm.
she keeps doing dumb things and is just so naive with how she's handling the world. And it's like as the reader we're picking up on things that like the
Mm-hmm.
narrator's supposed to, but it's going over
Mm-hmm.
her
Mm-hmm.
head. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
so frustrating being in this point of view.
The narrator felt very much like a self-insert, although I appreciated what they were trying to do in regards to how she was being selected to be part of the ministry, and how like her familial background, like that was all very interesting. For whatever we're spoiling, but her family, her mom was actually a refugee, and there's a lot of trauma that comes with being a refugee, and all of that was came came into the picture and was highlighted for why she was selected, because she's used to working in she's used to being an outsider, she's used to working with people who don't automatically fit in and have something different about them. um so like that's all. I can
Mhm.
imagine that being very helpful when working with a man from the 1950s. um but I don't know, it felt very clunky. It felt like that was very it wasn't as elegantly put, I guess.
Yeah, I think that honestly, the first 20% of the book wasn't bad. It wasn't bad because it set everything up. You
Yeah.
could see the potential for it. It was really interesting having the narrator coming from like that
Mhm.
additional different perspective. And then also all of the expats, like even even the concept in the beginning where they were talking about whether or not to call them
Mhm.
expats
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
refugees, and they're like,
Yeah. Mhm.
we're kidnapped victims. Um, like even all of that was just like a really like interesting aspect of the book, but as you guys will see in part two, it just like gets so slow and sluggish, and the pacing just
Crumbles. The pacing
is
crumbles. The
terrible.
pacing literally
Yes.
crumbles.
All right, Greta,
Okay, part
take it
2.
away.
A man the narrator refers to as the brigadier begins hanging around the ministry, often with another man named, is it Celis? Celis? Okay, often with
Celise?
another man named Celis.
Mm-hmm.
She assumes they work for the Ministry of Defense and chalks their odd manner of speech up to them being top brass and always living in the past. In addition, she attributes little significance to Graham's description of a handheld projection device he saw at the ministry, though it doesn't sound like any object she's ever seen. Her handler Quentin becomes agitated when he sees Graham's sketch of the device. His fear escalates when the expats from 1973 stop showing up on the body scanners and MRIs, and he insists they're being spied on. The narrator pays little attention. I like how we begin to like know how just clueless she is throughout this entire thing. So the narrator pays little attention to what she deems his paranoia. She's distracted by developments with the expats, like revelations that Maggie is a lesbian and Arthur is either gay or bisexual, the things that matter when the world is at danger. After Quentin disappears
Mm-hmm.
and ministry leadership says he defected, Vice Secretary Adela signs herself on as the narrator's new handler. The narrator admires this steely, mysterious woman who wears an eye patch and has a heavily reconstructed face. Adela reveals the brigadier and Salis Sales. I can't remember Sales. Solis, thank you.
Celise.
Adela reveals that the brigadier and Solis are spies and they've evaded the ministry surveillance. Meanwhile, Graham begins training to become a field agent for the ministry. At a ceremony for his admittance to the program, Quentin appears in the crowd and gives the narrator a document, which reveals how the ministry stole the time door just before a sniper kills him. The narrator is traumatized by his murder and descends into a debilitating depression. All the action just happened. This is part
Okay.
two.
This
Okay.
literally that's the 20% to like the
Girl, that's more
55%
because I
mark.
remember getting at the I remember hitting the 30% mark and thinking, "Oh my gosh, nothing is
Mm-hmm.
happening." Like was like when is it going to happen? And then all of
Yeah.
this happens.
No, like no, like but all of that happens
Oh
past the
yeah,
50%
accurate.
mark. Like
Yeah.
that middle quarter was
Mhm.
just slow. It was just the narrator document like day-to-day life of
Yeah.
living with Commander Gore as he's like discovering new things, which honestly
Mhm.
could have been interesting, but the way that the narrator was
Mhm.
essentially narrating was just
Mhm.
so boring, and it felt like a combination of a diary entry
Mhm.
and a field entry. Like she was trying to stay like logical and pragmatic and just give the facts, but then her emotions
Mhm.
kept seeping through, and her emotions was just her starting to get like
Mhm.
obsessive
Mhm.
over Gore. And honestly, I thought that the romance could have gone in that direction where it was like
Mhm.
they start to develop feelings for each other, but they don't know if it's like actual feelings or if they're like trauma
Okay.
bonding. Like, is he just
Okay.
bonding to her because she's
Mhm.
like this safe anchor in this new world? And then for her, it's like, does she like him or is she just being
I
overly
see. Okay.
invested in him?
Mhm.
Like, additionally, could it be the case that there's like a power
Mm.
dynamic thing where she like feels like, oh, I can't be with this person because like I'm his handler, like
Mhm.
this is inappropriate, I can't cross that line. Like, I thought there were so many ways that the romance could have developed in that regards for it to be a conflict, but instead it just felt more like she was like obsessing over him, like this was like an infatuation, a crush, but like a teenage crush. Like, I don't know, it just felt weird and inappropriate in the wrong way. Like, not inappropriate in the sexy way, but inappropriate in like the
Yeah,
grooming kind of
there were
way.
several times when the narrator talks about how she likes the fact that the she can influence the expat's perception of modern day life. And every time she would say that, I was like, "Oh, this is creepy." Like there's obviously this very big power dynamic because they are trying to keep these expats, in this time, like in this timeline. And so it's creepy, and it's like you have a lot of power, and obviously you were selected as someone who understands that there are power dynamics in the world and understands that those need to be navigated very like carefully. But the way that it was almost like she was teetering towards like the bad side is horrifying. And honestly, if she would have gone all the way and just like made a complete disarray of this entire situation, I felt like that would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to see this kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a switch in power dynamics, especially especially when being compared to like, a what was he like, he has like ship experience, like military ship experience, he's a commander obviously. Like that would have been a really interesting contrast. But like to flip the power dynamic on that situation, but it never really happened. There was a moment when they were away from each other. The Gore was able Graham Commander Graham was able to get some kind of license that allowed all the expats to like travel and be away from their handlers. And that entire time, she's just kind of like twiddling her thumbs, waiting for him to come back.
She made her entire personality that year
Yeah,
about taking care
yeah,
of him.
and that's it.
That's
And
it.
then
That's it.
he like calls her during the holidays, and she is like fawning after him. He's like, "Oh, I just wanted to come say hi, like call and say hi," and she's like babble. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then also, I did not like her relationship with her family. I did not like I
It
did
was
not like
also
her
kind of
relationship with her
weird.
sister. Her sister is very much like connected to the trauma that their mother experienced, and like will write about it. And the main character feels like, "Oh, why are you putting our entire life on display?" And it's like, we all process trauma differently. There's a lot going on in this book. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. And then I feel like it could have gone multiple ways. Like, the author could have focused on the
Mhm.
social
Mhm.
commentary about like
Mhm.
the really hard-hitting stuff that was mentioned briefly, like
Mhm.
the facts of racism, the facts of
Mhm.
like homophobia, like sexual
Mhm.
identity, gender roles. Like, the entire book could have focused on how different things have happened in
Mhm.
the last 200 years, while also simultaneously talking about how not much has changed, and it being like
Mhm.
the center focus of
Mhm.
these two characters as they're having these conversations, coming
That
to
would have
those
been a lovely slice of
realizations.
life.
And then,
That would have been a really good. Yes,
like
that would
more of
have
a
been a
slice of
lovely slice
life.
of life. But then they added the spy thriller.
Yeah, so let's move into that part, as we start to get more into the tinfoil hat conspiracy aspect of this book,
Yeah.
in which the main character literally ostrich the entire time and is just like, la 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 la, everything's fine. And it's like, babe, you're in the middle of a giant
Yeah.
government
Yeah.
conspiracy. Like, please do something. Okay, So on to part three. So the expat from 1793 is shot and killed while trying to escape the ministry. The narrator finds evidence that someone is framing her for sabotaging the ministry's security system. She and Graham are out one night, drunk, when the Brigadier and Celise accost them and try to kill them with a futuristic weapon. The time door, it turns out, can support only a finite number of time travelers. The Brigadier and Celise can't return to their time unless they kill two others. Graham and the narrator escape, and the adrenaline rush, fear, and alcohol led the narrator to act on her attraction to Graham. When the ministry learns about the attempt on their lives, the expats and the Bridges are moved and confined to safe houses. There, Graham and the narrator begin a full fledged romantic and sexual relationship. So I have this separated as part three because it really only encompasses about 10 to 15% of the book. But it's the turning point of when we really get like an action sequence that causes them to have to react to the situation, which is the attempted murder. And then our narrator basically is like in a huge depressive spiral because she's going through the PTSD of having Quentin, her handler, like shot in the head right next to her, then this attempted killing, and she's just like so overwhelmed she just shoots down, right? She has a mental breakdown. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not trying to discredit the validity of the trauma from the incidents, but it also made zero sense to me because she wasn't close to Quentin at all. Like, it was literally just a coworker who she thought was like having a breakdown. Like, she thought that he was having a breakdown due to like being overworked and that he was just getting like paranoid for no reason. And she wasn't even like really that worried about him. And then he just like appears to her in a frenzy trying to give her this like secret information, and he like gets killed right next to her, and she just like has a mental breakdown. And I'm like, it with how much time was spent on her PTSD from that event in relation to the rest of the events that happened in the book, it's like it didn't make sense because I'm just like, how are you that affected by it? And then like that would make more sense with like the attempted murder maybe. And then all of that leads to her finally being like, YOLO. Like I need to act on my attraction for this man because like I could die at any moment. And they have like a kiss, right? A kiss. They touch lips and they're unmarried. It's out of wedlock. And Graham's just like having a meltdown too because he's just like, I have feelings for this woman, but I need to court her the right way. And she's like, no, pinch my nipples. Literally
Yeah. Yeah.
the amount of times that nipples is brought up in this story is uncomfortable. An uncomfortable amount of times. Okay, the sex in this story
is bad.
Uncomfortable.
Is bad. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's yeah. Mm.
I need a moment. Give me your
Okay,
thoughts.
so this entire like action sequence to me was when I was finally like, okay, so when part two, the entire action sequence, I was finally like, okay, finally we're getting into the sci-fi part of this story. We're getting into the action, we're getting into the spy thriller part. I was like, clearly, like from the start of the book until like the 30% mark, I was like, clearly we're revving up to something. There were drops that like Quentin was like disappearing, coming back. There were little hints and little like foreshadowings about some of the expats not being picked up in the MRI scans and not being picked up by cameras and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, clearly we're like getting to something. And then there was that little drop that like Graham was out one day and he saw some man or person with like a machine and then sketched it out. And then our narrator was like, I don't know what that is, and then just like brushes it off. So all of that, we were clearly like leading to something, you know? And then we get this like action sequence where they go out with their friends. This is the first time that our narrator is taking Graham out to meet her friends, and then they're at this like bar, pub, whatever, and then they like almost get assassinated, and now they're running around the city, and she's on the back of Graham's motorcycle because of course Graham has a motorcycle. And it all, like you said it perfectly, it all culminates to this like kiss, and you're like I argue some people were like, oh my god, finally they kiss, and I'm like, oh my god, finally some action. I was like, yeah, put aside the kiss. I don't care for the romance. I want to see the spy. I want to see like the spy thriller. You know, I want to see what the government conspiracy is. I want to see them trying to sneak around and trying to get down to business. I want to feel like I'm in a James Bond movie. And that is not what I got
Hmm.
at all. It's not what I
No,
got at all.
the next 10% is just documenting their sexual life together. It's just documenting how much sex they're having, when they're having it, how it's like, how they feel, what like the after cuddling is like. It was just
It was so
focusing so much on the sexual relationship between these characters. And I'm like, you're in the middle
conspiracy.
of a government conspiracy. Like, you're
Yeah,
in a safe
they're literally,
house.
yeah, it's crazy.
Like,
Also, good part to note that this is literally when our narrator gets a gun for like the first time. She's given a gun.
she shouldn't have
She's
gotten a
giving a
gun. She
gun.
should not have a gun because she can't
And the
even use
fact
the gun.
in my head, I'm like, she's a spy. They're literally like a government agent. How has she not been given a gun before? And then Adela is like, okay, well, do you know how to use it? Like, do you know how to, and she's like, I haven't done this in a while. Also, I was never very good at this. And I was like, what? How are you expected to care for a time traveler where you don't know how to use a gun? What? I yeah. Anyways, anyways.
Okay. So I part 4 of this is kind of unfair to you because I basically put all the
No,
action
it's fine.
together.
You can
So
take
it's like a fast sequence bullet point of like
thing. Yeah.
everything that happens in the
Oh
last
god.
30% of this book. Are we ready to talk? Okay, I will
What?
say I didn't actually anticipate the plot
Wait,
twist in
you
this book.
didn't?
So I was
I was
no,
so
I was
okay,
pleasantly
okay, okay,
surprised by
okay,
it.
okay. Part four. So the Ministry operation have descended into chaos when Graham finds Arthur has been killed and Maggie is missing. He and the narrator reunite with Maggie in an underground tunnel system. The narrator reveals that tracking devices are implanted in the expats and that she betrayed Graham for not telling him sooner. Adela arranges protection for the expats and tells the narrator to meet her. The narrator arrives to find the Brigadier and Celise holding Adela at gunpoint. Adela explains that she is the narrator's future self and that all this happened before, though last time Arthur and Maggie both died. In her timeline, she and Graham are married and have a son. Go.
Sorry,
Okay,
hang on,
okay,
hang on.
okay,
Can we
okay,
take a
okay,
moment?
okay,
Can we take
okay,
a
okay.
moment to talk about this plot point? Because I didn't see that Adela was her future self.
Okay.
And you know why?
Why?
You know why? Okay. Because how the fuck did the narrator not recognize that that was her from the future? Like 15 years in the future only.
Okay.
Like, I know that she reconstructed her
Yes.
face, she
Yes.
has an eye
Mm-hmm,
patch or
mm-hmm,
whatever, but
mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
how do you not recognize that that's you from the future?
The interactions between our narrator and Adela. So, AKA our narrator's actual name is Adela. That's also maybe why they didn't give us a name.
No, that's not her name.
Oh,
No, it's not her name because I was thinking, I
oh
was
my
like,
god,
oh,
that's
okay, so
right.
we found
She
out the
picks a
narrator's
name
name.
for the beginning letters of the book of the
Uh
dictionary.
huh.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so funny. Okay, no, you're so right. We still don't know her name. Okay,
Mhm.
anyways, so where was I going with that?
I'm sorry. The reason why I remember this is because when they were introducing Adela as the
huh.
future self, I was like, Adela doesn't sound
Yeah,
Cambodian.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so the whole bit is that like Adela has time traveled so much, right? Has time traveled so much that it breaks down parts of your body. So she's had to like reconstruct her face through surgery or whatever. And there are bits and pieces of interactions between Adela and our main character. And during that time, our main character describes Adela as someone who's very steely and very like stoic and very matter of fact and very but likes to dance occasionally and is very just very standoffish, and it's so different from the way in which the narrator comes off as, because Adela is someone who you would argue is like a very strong dominating female lead, our main character is a do nothing self insert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very odd that like I can see why even the main character is like, "Oh, that's me? Oh, funny." But also just
And
like,
that's why it was so surprising for me, and that's why I didn't see it coming, and I was like genuinely surprised. And I was like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting this." And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, this is interesting." And then it gets disappointing again. All right, let's continue.
So the Brigadier and Celise, who have come from much further into the future, claim the Ministry killed the expats. They also blame the Ministry for a bleak future world, which inspires their attempt to go back in time and assassinate Adela. The two women who killed Celise and wait, the two women who killed Celise and snatched the Brigadier's weapon, causing him to flee. Okay, so this like the reasoning why the Brigadier and Celise come back is very interesting to me, because now we touch on climate change and the effects that bringing these people back from the past have. And it's so funny because now I am siding with the Brigadier and Celise instead of siding with the Ministry.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%. Like instead of us rooting for them, I was just like, "Oh, so we're the
We're the
bad
bad
guys in
guys. Yeah,
here."
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Because so the Ministry is pretty much causing like a global climate crisis. And the Brigadier and Celise are literally trying to fight against a fascist regime, which is what you, as the self insert narrator, and the Ministry stand for. So you're like, you mean I'm on the side of I've been on the side of fascism this entire time. Like it's absolutely, you're just like, oh my god, all of a sudden I want the Brigadier and Celise to win. I want them to win. I want them to take down this
mhm.
entire, government side quest, because everyone else is gonna freaking die unless they do so. And then here comes Adela trying to frantically explain what is actually going on. And now I'm just like, Adela, shut up. I don't, you absolute government shill. I have nothing I want to say to you. Get out of my face. So Adela frantically tells the
Mhm.
narrator she's in danger and says a mole is feeding Ministry information, including time door location, to the Brigadier, whom she can't find. Adela, through Quentin, as Adela thought Quentin was the mole. She explains, so she had him neutralized. Can we go back to the fact that our narrator was so distraught by the death of Quentin when in the future, going back, she was the person that killed Quentin?
Mhm.
It makes absolutely
Mhm.
no sense. Okay. The narrator goes to the Ministry to shut down the expat project as Adela instructed. She finds Samelia there and learns she is the mole. Samelia holds the narrator at gunpoint, telling her she's become a murderer for her she's become a murderer in her future ministry role. The narrator wrestles a gun with Samelia and then takes her to a room with the time door. The narrator tries to use her gun to destroy the time door. She fails to destroy it, damage causes the Brigadier and Adela to implode. While the narrator is distracted, Samelia grabs the narrator's other holstered gun and then holds the narrator as a hostage to escape um, when security agents arrive. Outs- when security agents arrive. Outside, Samelia lets the narrator go and she returns to her safe house. Back in the same house, Graham treats the narrator like an enemy. He says he and Maggie are leaving and the narrator won't see them again. The Ministry forces the narrator to retire. She moves in with her parents and takes a meaningless job as she tries to recover emotionally. One day, she receives a package from Graham. She uses clues from the photos to uses clues from a photo it contains to determine that Graham and Maggie are in Alaska and decided to go there to look for the man she loves. She writes a note to her past self, urging her to make better choices if she wants a better future.
Okay. I was so happy when she got back to the safe house and Graham is like holding her at gunpoint and he's just like, our romance is dead. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, you betrayed
Mm-hmm.
me. You were monitoring me this whole time. You knew there was a microchip and that the government was like tracking
Mm-hmm.
me. this entire
Mhm.
time. I was just an experiment
Mhm.
to you,
Mhm.
and I don't believe that you
Mhm.
actually have
Mhm.
true feelings
Mhm.
for me. And I'm like, good,
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
I was so
Mhm. Mhm.
excited. I was so
Mhm.
thrilled. I was like, this romance is gonna
Yes.
end. And
Because
I was
there
so
was no
excited
romance
for it.
there to begin with. For everything I said about
Hmm.
Graham being a shitty romantic lead, he is a shitty romantic lead. I do not buy their romance one single bit. But this last part when Graham takes autonomy of his life and we learn that Graham has actually been sneaking around and using his undetectable through like cameras power and has been sneaking around in order to kind of secure a like fake passport and an escape route in case anything goes down and save his fellow expats. I loved that. I was like, of course, of course. This is like the best
Hmm.
part of this character.
And for me personally, that's part of the reason why I liked
Okay.
Gore. Like, I did like his personality in the beginning because I found his humor very dry and I appreciated it. I loved his sense of curiosity about everything. Like, one of the first scenes, like the first night that he's in our present timeline, he takes apart the toilet because he just wants to figure out how it works. Like, I just found his character charming to read about, like his whole discovery of everything. And also his approach to how he handles it and how he interacts with people. And I love the fact that he's just smart. Like he thinks logically because his the entire time he's just like suspicious of everybody, being like, what is their actual true intent? He's working in the shadows, you know. When our narrator is supposed to protect him and she's the one with the gun, she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. So he's the one who's like, "Okay, I set up a rendezvous point with the other expats. Let's go there." And she's like,
What?
"What?" And she's
Yep.
just shell shocked by
Mm-hmm.
everything. And he's just like taking control and
Mm-hmm.
taking matters into his own hands. He has everything set up. I'm like, "You're the spy agent. Why is your person acting like a better spy agent than
Yeah.
you? Like, how does he have a handle on a fake passport in the present day timeline when he doesn't know jack shit, but you don't know how to get one? Like, make it make
Yeah.
sense." So when he was like standing up for himself and being like, "No, you betrayed us, you lied
Mm-hmm.
to us, I'm
Mm-hmm.
leaving and I don't want you to
Mm-hmm.
follow me." Literally the only way that this would have been better is if Arthur survived. Like the fact that Arthur
That's
died,
very
I was so upset
yeah.
about because the trio was such a strong friendship
Mm-hmm.
group and I wanted them to just escape and live their best
Mm-hmm.
lives
My
together.
favorite character is Maggie.
Maggie's
Maggie's
amazing.
a ray of sunshine. Maggie's a ray of sunshine in this very grim situation or grim book rather I would say.
Hmm.
Maggie is our expat. She is a lesbian and she is discovering what social dating what casual dating is like, and is also super into like the alt punk music scene and takes our main character to some of these like girl punk girl groups, and it's so good. It's so lovely, 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 lovely. Maggie's a favorite character. And that's it.
Yeah. Okay, honestly, the reason why I rated characters three
Uh-huh.
points was for Gore, Arthur, and
That's
Maggie.
so
Like
funny.
those were the three
That's
points
funny.
because their friendship was so good,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish we got even more of
Mm-hmm.
that. But because we're stuck in the narrator's
Mm-hmm.
POV, we don't get to see their
Yeah.
friendship. But honestly, it's so good, and the fact that they were able to like escape at the end, and they don't kill the narrator. The only reason why the ministry doesn't
Yeah.
get rid of
Yeah.
her is because they're like, "Oh, well, you're one of those like rare
Mm-hmm.
genetics that can like travel through time and it doesn't affect you as
Mm-hmm.
badly. So like we might need you in the future, so we're just going to retire
Mm-hmm.
you."
Okay, Millie, final thoughts on the Ministry of Time, please.
I hate how much this book disappointed me. And
Okay.
I really, really wish that the author had just picked one or maybe two avenues of
Mm-hmm.
thought and just stuck with that instead of
Okay.
25. And it would have
Okay.
been so much better. I don't really understand the people who like this book. I'm gonna be quite honest. Um,
I don't
but
blame
to
you.
each his own. And we picked a really interesting first book to review.
Okay. So my final thoughts for this are this book had so much potential and it didn't live up to any of it. In the synopsis, it gets sold to you or described to you as being time traveling, spy thriller, workplace comedy, and and an ingenuous exploration of the nature of power and the potential for love to change it all. And yes, it does. It's like, yes, it does have time travel. Yes, it is a spy thriller. Yes, it is a workplace comedy, but it doesn't fully execute any of those things to the full extent. I felt like it was a lot thrown into a very small book. I feel like none of its none of what it was trying to do was fleshed out well enough. I found myself wanting more romance, more like, if you're gonna go romance, and do more nuanced romance. Give me, give me a better analysis of like the character dynamics and the power dynamics that there are in this book, because there are power dynamics. If you're gonna do a spy thriller, then don't give me the rollout of the plot twist and the whole, like, the reason why it would be a spy thriller after the 30-40% mark. If you're going to do the effects of of time travel and what that can mean for a future, don't give me that until like the very, last 10%. And if you're going to do a workplace comedy, then make it funny,
Yeah,
because it was
very
not
funny.
funny.
Um,
Um, you succeeded. Congratulations. I will be rating this book a 2 star. I don't know if it's a 1 star, because I have read 1 stars. I have read 1 stars. And I typically don't have a lot of 1 stars, because I'll just DNF them. And I should have known when I DNF'd this book twice and then came back for it to finish to record this episode. So,
I wanted to DNF this book so badly after the 40%
oh,
mark, and the only reason I kept through it is because of this podcast episode.
yeah, I actually, when I committed to reading it for this podcast episode, I was interested. I think I was genuinely interested in what was going to happen. I was interested in when we were going to get action, so I kept on coming back to it. I knew there was some romance, so I was interested in how that was going to flesh out. Like, I was interested in the story and where it was going, but in the same way that you're interested in like a car crash on the freeway. You're like, where is that going? How does that end? So, like, a morbid curiosity, I guess,
Mhm.
in how this book was ending, because I was pretty positive that it was not going to be like a 5 star read for me, the way that it was sold to me by the internet. Yeah.
I I I'm just ready to move on to the other books that we have on the lineup for 2025 because I
Yeah.
cannot wait for the rest of these books. Um
I'm being held against my will. I'm being held against my will. It's fine.
all right, for next week's episode, we are taking another recommendation from the Goodreads Choice Awards. So we're gonna see how this one fares in comparison. And you've heard us mention it multiple times already in this podcast. And next week's episode is gonna be on The Wedding People by Alison Espach, which is like a contemporary chick lit kind of book. So different category from this sci-fi romance spy thriller. Um, but again, another book that's like slightly out of both of our comfort zones, I would say. So we're
Mhm.
gonna see how that
Mhm.
one fares for us, and if we're ever gonna take another Goodreads choice recommendation again.
I snorted. It's going to be very rough. It's going to be very rough. I have not picked this up yet. Obviously, you're like 60% of the way through. But I have no idea what to expect from this. The cover is really interesting. So we'll see what I know nothing about this book. I have not read the synopsis, obviously, but like
Don't read the
I'm really
synopsis. Please just go into it blind, 100% blind. I beg of you.
okay, okay, okay. I'm starting it next week, so we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. All right. If you want to see more of Millie, where can people find
You
you?
guys can find me on my booktube channel called Into the Nook, where I do a bunch of reading
Mhm.
reviews and reading themed videos. You guys can also find me on my rejuvenated, revived Instagram account at Into the
She
Nook
did
Rel.
CPR on that
I
thing.
did. It took a while, and she came back to life. You guys can follow me on that, where I'm trying to post daily. Greta, where can they find you?
You can find me all over the internet at Greta's Favorite Things, including YouTube. I posted on my first YouTube video, and it's a book YouTube video. Very exciting. I'm also on Twitch, and I play video games over there. So if you're into that, if you want to hang out with my amazing, incredible Twitch community, it's at Greta's Favorite Things all over the internet. Okay, we will be back in 2 weeks with the wedding people. You will get to see our faces again. Oh, if you're listening to us, this is a YouTube video. So if you would like to
Come
come hang
find
out
us
over
on
there
YouTube.
and to see all the faces I was making as Millie was describing her love for Graham is
He was the
crazy.
only good part of this
Anyways,
book, okay?
I argue Maggie was the best part of this book, but so it goes. All right, everybody, we will see you in 2 weeks with the wedding people. Bye.
Bye.